Good morning and welcome to the VIP seat. Today is September 5th, and this week's top stories in private aviation include how college athletes are cashing in the private jet market and an attempted business jet theft in Maryland. Your hosts today include yours truly, Jesse Naor, and our guest today, Jackie Dalton. So sit back, buckle up, and let's take off. All right, Jackie. So this week, actually a couple days ago, my old home airport, where Grand Aviation used to be based out of, had an interesting incident. A guy apparently drove onto the airfield, got into a Gulfstream, and turned the engines on. And the pilot discovered him and said, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" Pretty wild story, but I will say, I mean, small airports, these things can happen. Have you hadn't heard of anything like this before?
When you sent me the list, I'm like, only in business aviation, we're talking about, stealing a 1984 G4. I would have gone for either the G150 on the field or one of Grandview's Phenom 300, but wild.
It was easy pickings.
Easy pickings, I guess. And he's a pilot.
Yeah, he has an ATP. I mean, we start digging into this a little more. The guy had an incident a few years ago, like 2017, involving a gun and some domestic disturbance of some kind. And I'm like, how in the heck does this guy, like, is he flying commercially? I hope not. I would think not.
Well, he was arrested in 2016 for having unregistered firearm. But he had an AR-15 and a silencer and a sawed-off shotgun, and so I don't know where. Was he rummaging around the airfield? Does he work on the airfield? Is he still flying? Did he just decide I need to steal a jet?
And this is like I've been on this airfield for many, many years, and it's like I think this is the case with a lot of small airports. Usually nothing is happening and they're pretty quiet. People aren't really paying attention to these locations. But I mean, there are significant security risks. I mean, I've seen some airfields that don't even have fences, and I wonder how that works.
How does that work? Well, I mean, you just can never underestimate, ground security line teams, and it had to have been a private hangar. Probably didn't have a management company. I mean, the owner of the jet was pretty interesting. He's a media guy, but I agree with you. You can get a little complacent, and if incidents aren't occurring, you might think that you're safe and your assets are secure, but you could just never. It's a 24/7 industry. You can't cut corners when it comes to security.
You can't. I mean, and just a simple thing of locking your airplane when you're not on it. Some people don't even do that.
I'm like, why wasn't the airplane locked?
I was
like local teenagers like partying in the cabin, and gotta lock up your airplane.
No, I mean, people do get complacent though, especially if you're you're inside prepping some catering or whatever he was working on, and then just decided to leave it unlocked for a couple minutes and some guy snuck on it. Although I love that at his bail hearing, he was questioning the trespassing charges because he said that the security let him on the airfield, and then that happens. They probably just waved him on. I've seen it happen before.
He might get away with that one, actually. He thinks that one should be dropped, but I'm with you. He's like, wait, he said, aren't these kind of severe charges?
Yeah, he said,
I'd be more concerned about the felony.
I'd really like to go home. These charges are a little bit steep. That's what he said in the hearing, which cracks me.
I gotta try that line.
It's a little, it's like, Judge, it's a little steep.
It's a little steep. I think, it was on your. He's lucky you weren't there, Jets. You would have taken him down for sure. It wasn't going to be happening.
I would have been speechless. Like, I don't know, although when I see something, I say something, okay? Like, I don't let that stuff slide.
Yeah. No, I hear you. See something, say something, for sure. His hearing's October 16th, so we have to put it on the calendar and see how it goes.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely do an update after that comes through. I want to see what charges this guy ends up with. But folks, lock your airplanes out there. It's a requirement 135, not 91, but still a good practice, I would think.
Amen.
And the next big news is it was a huge news week actually in private aviation. We had a lot of stories coming at us. The next big one is flyExclusive is now taking over Volato's managed fleet. They've been in the news a lot recently. There was layoffs and leases that were announced a couple weeks ago. The stock price has been below $1 since June. So interesting concept. I mean, at least they didn't, go bankrupt and leave customers without service, but definitely didn't see this one coming.
Now, interesting move. See, I would have said didn't see them moving over to fly exclusive necessarily, but definitely challenged overall. And, the light jet market you're a lot more familiar with than I am, but it's a challenging model. And we saw Jetit not be able to make it through. So I think this is an interesting way to try to resolve issues that are in play for Volato.
Yeah.
Fly exclusive, taking this on, it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to handle, because more isn't always better. Bigger isn't always better. And it's going to be challenging, and they've had to go through their own adjustments since going public, and they've been adjusting and making some good changes. Yeah, one of the things that I found really interesting was that Volato wasn't operating under 91 on their fractional program. Didn't you find that interesting?
I was really surprised by that. Yeah, because it listed when they sent the letter out to the fractional owners, it said, "Oh, hey, but you get this great benefit now that you don't have to pay federal excise tax on your flights." Fractional, like I thought everything was operated under fractional.
Yeah, that really stood out to me. And then the other thing is what the offering is, right? Like, what are you going to get as a client? Because it's a big shift. I mean, when loyalty when it comes to who you fly with, really is important. So these people invested in and are committed to Volato, and now this is going to be a big change.
Right.
So there's the 50,000, 50,000 goes over, and then you match 50,000, and then you get 130, right? There's this 30% offering if you buy more, and it's, those situations always make me a little bit nervous, how they're going to meet that demand, integrate the fleet. I think integrating the fleet will be interesting, but it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to meet that demand for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I think Fly Exclusive is a solid operator, as far as them integrating, like they already have the infrastructure to dispatch flights and, handle pilots and training and everything else. So I think, at least from that perspective, it's somewhat easy. But I mean, when it's a cultural difference, rules difference, that's always, I mean, and that was one of the challenges that Wheels Up had, integrating a whole bunch of businesses and different kinds of businesses into one platform. It's not without challenges.
It's not without its challenges. And, I'm always about flight safety focus, as are you. And so when you take something like this on, that's going to be, it's going to put some pressure for sure. And then Fly Exclusive just offloaded their G4s and, their super mids so that they could get things under control. And then you have Volato coming in with these G280s that they just bought, which I love the G280. But
Yeah.
that's gonna cause some challenges too. And then when you look at the numbers, if you look at the number of retail clients that they have and the number of aircraft and fractional owners, that always jumps out at me too. I feel like these retail programs that these operators get into can really present a challenge for them. And so now you're going to have two. You're going to have Fly's retail program, Volato's retail program.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it.
And it is tough to make money, especially in the light jet or smaller category. The problem is you still need two pilots up front, and that's the expensive part. Training and flying them. I mean, that's the most costly part of operating these businesses, and to not have much higher hourly rate to offset that cost. It'll be interesting to see how the numbers pan out.
No, I agree. And also just the demand on the pilots and the aircraft themselves, these light jets and mid jets, I really moved a lot of my business away from it because just in terms of, they're running 3-4 flights in a day, and it's just, you've got crew fatigue and delays and, an increase in issues. And if you're not reining that in, it kind of snowballs. I just don't want it to. I love Fly, so I just don't want it to see it disrupt their operations. And but I wish the best for everybody. The hardest thing is, the people who got let go. I've been hearing from some pilots. I think they let 100 pilots go. I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. It always affects the workforce.
No, but I do think, at least pilots these days have some pretty lucrative career options in a lot of areas. I mean, the airlines.
Yeah, it's true.
The airlines have stopped a bit. I think that frenzy that we were in there for a while has kind of stopped, but it still pays to be a pilot right now. And lots of good 91 operations out there and private owners that are probably
great opportunities for sure. Yeah, I agree.
For sure. All right. Last week we covered there was a seizure of a Nigerian aircraft by a Chinese investor. This week, in a pretty unprecedented move, the U.S. Department of Justice seized Venezuela's President Maduro's aircraft. It was in the Dominican Republic, so they were working together with the Dominican Republic agencies to do this. But apparently, there was, obviously, you were not allowed to sell to the Venezuelans under a number of laws out there. They registered their company in San Marino, so a shell company was set up in San Marino, which apparently allows anybody to get registered there. And then some company in Florida sold this aircraft to the colleagues of President Maduro. But wow, yeah, that's a lot of interesting things happening in the world stage with airplanes right now.
Well, first of all, props to the selection on the jet that they bought. I love the Falcon 900EX. It's one of my favorite long-range aircraft, and the efficiency and the performance is fantastic. But, it's interesting you say, some company in South Florida, and South Florida is always getting a bad rap, and it's like, which company in South Florida did this deal?
Yeah.
But it's not the only one. I think that a lot of this happened over the last few years. Maybe that's not, obviously not necessarily Maduro, but a lot of acquisitions occurred, and there's all that due diligence. Know your customer, and
right.
I love that the assistant secretary for export, Matthew Axelrod at the Department of Commerce, I loved his attitude. He's like, we're coming to get any airplane that was acquired. I'm like, go get him, because we want to bring it back to America.
There you go.
We want more jets. Get every jet that left. Bring it back.
No, it's a beautiful plane. I think at the time it was valued at $13 million. You do wonder how this slid through the Know Your Customer forms, because even in the last few years, if you're doing any of these transactions, you're supposed to know the LLC, who owns it, all the different people involved in it. They get pretty detailed. So I guess it'll come out in the report eventually, but I think someone in South Florida is probably getting some phone calls right now.
And I'm sure it was intentional that it's not in that story, or that it hasn't been made public yet, but we come from management and charter operations, but I'm sure every whole aircraft broker out there who does their due diligence and operates with integrity, we certainly know a few of them. I'm sure they were like, see, this is the stuff that goes on.
This
when
is
you
why
let
you
just
do
anybody
this.
be a broker. Yeah.
Well, and that's, I've talked to a number of people over the years too, that there's no requirements for you to be an aircraft broker, or a charter broker. Yeah. And people don't realize that when they're doing these deals, you assume, oh, it's like the real estate industry and everyone knows what they're doing. Like, not always.
Isn't that crazy? You can't sell a house without a license, but you can put somebody 40, 50,000 feet up in the air without one. But I think change is coming on that. I think, and like, all the initiatives that you've been involved in, it takes time for them to remember you telling me last year, it takes time for, things to get done. And, I think this is just another example of why it's important that we know who is buying and selling airplanes.
Well, and it's moments like this that create regulations. When they find out that somehow someone sold an aircraft to Venezuela, despite the rules that existed, that's when, regulatory agencies start to say, okay, maybe we actually need to manage this process a little more heavily.
Which is better, because those of us who self-regulate, right, and work together the right way, you don't want to have regulation come in. But obviously, I agree with you. Who sold an airplane to Venezuela?
Well, and maybe, legitimately, they probably didn't know, who knows how they kind of ran, the deal side, it's maybe not always transparent.
Yeah, I could give the benefit of the doubt until we know more.
Hopefully.
South Florida.
And I said we're both Florida residents, so we can say this. I don't know why. I don't know why South Florida is just sometimes the land of con men and women, but we're good guys.
We're taking it over. There's more of us down here, and we're making change.
Well, and I think too, it just comes from, Florida's just such an active market. It's so busy, so a lot of the activity is all happening here, and sometimes that means
I love it. I think the infrastructure here and the airport, I think it's fantastic. I love seeing all the airplanes fly by all the time, right after, right out of my balcony. And, I'm really impressed with the aviation industry down here. I think it's fantastic.
It is. Good weather, business friendly.
Great weather.
Yeah. Except for the summer. I do need a little summer vacay away from the heat sometime. In our next story today, Airshare has announced the elimination of repositioning surcharges. Fractional customers will no longer have to pay for those charges. And this is after a number of changes over at Airshare. They acquired Wheels Up's aircraft management arm last year. They've got about 150 aircraft at this point with over 600 employees. So they have grown significantly. But what are your thoughts on this? Don't customers still have to pay for repositioning charges no matter what? Even if it's not listed.
And the consumers become so, right. There's like decade worth of don't pay for unless the plane's not repositioning, that's the only time you're not paying for reposition. This is just all about price structure. And it's a little bit challenging. I don't like this kind of messaging. I'm really rooting for Airshare. I like the fleet. They've got some nice aircraft, but some interesting things are definitely going on there. But when it comes to repositioning, I don't think it works out well for the industry to get the consumer to think that, because that's what dynamic flying is. The ability to reposition is what our strength is, right? So, right. And it's just a matter of price structure, right? And so then you're looking at pricing in the market and it's, this looks like this is without repositioning. And then there's something priced this way. You've got to reposition. And you got to pay for it.
The airplane is going to
Who's paying for it?
Someone's paying for it.
Someone's paying for it.
Well, and I used to explain it this way because when the charter company I used to run, we were very, very transparent about it. We said, this is all the repositioning that's involved and this is why the cost is what it is. And our hourly rate was truly based on how many hours the plane actually flew, not the passenger leg. But so many times customers would see our hourly rate and be like, oh, wow, that's so cheap. And I'm like, yes, but we charge for everything. And the other companies are doubling or 1.5-ing their price just to show that it's no repositioning, but it is no matter what.
Well, that's why the customer relationship is so important, working with people who, really do want to understand what it is that they're buying into and, don't necessarily want to get some people like that easy locked-in rate, right? This ties into the fact that they're launching a jet card, which we've seen this before. And, we kind of know how it plays out a little bit. Yeah, you have to pay for repositioning. So I think it's just a matter of it being buried in the cost.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's interesting because Airshare's model for the fractionals is very different than others. You pay for days, essentially. It's unlimited flight hours within a pilot's duty day limit. That sounds like a really complicated math problem, but I'd love to see the numbers and how that actually works out for their profitability.
No, I know, me too. We should they've got Compass Capital. They've got a capital investment in mid-July, 2 guys from Kansas. I love that one of them said something about betting on the jockey. I like to bet on the jockey. Of course, I look at that and say, don't bet on the jockey unless he's on a good horse or she's on a good horse, right? It always comes down to the horse. So, but it'll be interesting to see what they do with this. They're also expanding into different territories. So they've been up in the Northeast and now they're going to be on the West Coast. But, I heard really positive things when they initially did the acquisition over from Wheels Up because they were set up to integrate pretty seamlessly, which is always a positive. But I think we're seeing some signs here with these new programs, whether it's having not run them before or not knowing what they're going to be up against or having a new formula that's going to work. So it's going to be interesting to see it play out.
Well, it does feel like Airshare has grown pretty organically. They didn't go from, 0 to 150 airplanes overnight. That was a pretty gradual. I mean, the Wheels Up deal last year, that was a pretty big deal for them, but at least they kind of had a solid background. Like they've been in the industry a while. They know what they're doing and they didn't do a SPAC deal and go public when they weren't ready to. Wish them luck. Hopefully they do well.
Wish them luck. Absolutely. Want everybody to win.
And they have a lot of celebrities on their website, I noticed, like the Kansas City Chiefs coach and some other ones, which is a great segue to the next story. It's getting really interesting since college athletes can now sell their name, image, and likeness and make money off of that. We're starting to see a lot of college private jet marketing deals opening up. Jackson Dart was the first one earlier this year. He signed with Nicholas Air. It's a 1-year deal, but it includes the ability to extend into his NFL career, which I found interesting. Wondering how that deal works and how long they can hang on to him. They also signed with another quarterback from the University of Texas. But it's kind of weird to me to see college students on private jets. I mean, I get they're big money makers and earners, but it's an interesting combination I didn't expect to see.
Yeah, I think the payment for college athletes brings its own, without even bringing aviation into it, brings its own issues. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But as far as any kind of ambassador program, or, first of all, if I met a college student who actually could afford to fly private and was flying private, and you look great in that sense, it makes, makes perfect sense. Yeah. But I don't think college students are really the right target market. The other thing I've just held since, I've been in the industry for about 15 years, and, I think everybody within the industry knows how I feel about, the marketing that's out there. And I think this is just another one of those, it's a disconnect. I'd rather see training programs and scholarships and things like that versus allocating money towards, marketing with a college student. And, yeah. I hope it works out for these companies and that they get a return on it, but I'd be surprised, and yeah. I think that it's just funds could be better utilized.
Well, and some of these are huge deals. I mean, the one that happened earlier this August, they said it's a 7-figure deal. This was Georgia Bulldogs quarterback Carson Beck signed a deal with a company called Airshare Charter, which actually I have never heard of before.
Airstar.
Sorry.
Airstar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that everybody tries, they're trying to have affiliations and get exposure. It's a very crowded marketplace, as it's a very crowded space, and, companies are looking for a way to compete against, these bigger budget advertising marketing companies, especially, these are smaller operators per se, all reputable. But I think we learned from Wheels Up that this doesn't work, right? It's not going to work with Tom Brady. It's not going to work with a basketball player.
Yeah. And with that, we'll be wrapping up the pod today because we like to keep things short and sweet here so you get your private aviation news fast and quick on your morning commute. So don't forget to subscribe to our weekly email digest and the show notes, and click follow wherever you get your podcasts. Comments and suggestions on what we should cover next are always welcome. So please stay in touch, and we'll see you next time on the VIP seat.